Welcome to What Do You Know Wednesday?
where we put each other on the spot so you don't have to.
One topic and one host who knows things.
And one host who knows some things.
I mean, in theory, we know things. Jess, we've been delving into polygamy, and if you will indulge me, I would like to continue with a little tour down a historical avenue. And so my question I have for you today is, what do you know about the happiness letter?
Maybe this means I wasn't a great Mormon. I know very little. I know it is a letter that Joseph Smith wrote to a very young woman he was wooing to become one of his wives, and that it argued basically like that we should give it into our carnal desires because it makes us happy and God wants us to be happy or something like that. Am I
Okay.
close?
You know a lot more than I did because I don't think this was taught, but you've picked it up along the way. So, yeah, very, very accurate. Okay, so let's get into it.
Okay.
See how much you recall.
That was the totality.
Well,
That's all I know.
You did an awesome job. The person to whom the letter, this happiness letter, was addressed was none other than Nancy Rigdon, the daughter of Sidney Rigdon. And Sidney Rigdon was, of course, Joseph Smith's counselor in the first presidency. So Nancy had been born in the roaring 20s, 1820s, that is. And so she was 19 in the spring of 1842. So I always have to use the yardstick that the church was established in 1830 to orient myself. Okay, so here's where we are. She's 19, and in the spring of that year, 1842, according to John C. Bennett, Miranda Hyde, who was the wife of Orson Hyde and Joseph Smith at this point, she approached Nancy Rigdon at Joseph Smith's request that spring, at a funeral no less, because that is the best place to start the courting process. So Miranda Hyde told Nancy, it's very Ghislaine Maxwell. It's giving very, like, grooming vibes, right? Getting other women to, but you'll see what I mean. So Miranda Hyde told Nancy that Joseph wanted to see her. John W. Rigdon was Nancy's brother. He gave a later affidavit about this event, okay? So he was present, and this is what he said happened. He said he didn't remember it being a funeral, but he said Nancy had gone to a church event, with a meeting held, quote, in a grove near the temple lot, close quote, where the Mormons were building the Nauvoo temple, as he remembered it. Does seem pretty accurate. It could have been a funeral. Anyway, he said that he recalled a lady friend who lived alone invited his sister to go home with her, which Nancy did. He doesn't name who this person was. It may or may not have been Miranda Hyde. Either way, Miranda was the one that negotiated the Joseph wants to meet with you. Okay, so John W. Rigdon, he said that Nancy and this other woman, this unnamed woman, they went to her home, they took off their bonnets, and according to John W. Rigdon, the woman began talking to Nancy about this new doctrine of polygamy. She said, look, at first it surprised me too, but I've come to believe that it's true. We won't surmise or speculate what Nancy might have been thinking and feeling at that time. John Rigdon said that Joseph Smith came into the house when Nancy and this unnamed woman were talking, and when Joseph joined them, the woman immediately left the room, leaving Joseph and Nancy alone. It was then, according to John Rigdon, quote, that Joseph made the proposal of marriage to my sister, close quote. Nancy, this is a quote, flatly refused him and said, quote, that if she ever got married, she would marry a single man or none at all. Nancy then took her bonnet and went home, leaving Joseph Smith at this unnamed woman's house. Okay.
Had she ever met Joseph before this, or was this just like this some dude waltzes in, sits next to her, and proposes marriage?
No, this was like, I mean, she was in the inner circle, right? Her dad is his
Okay, so
counselor.
she did okay. I'm
He's,
sorry. I was so appalled by it that I completely lost my bearing.
yeah, you were forgetting exactly. You were like, right. She wasn't just, any spring chicken in Nauvoo. She's, I mean, at this point, if Sydney has been in it since the beginning, and they're 12 years in now or more, then, and I mean, basically, this is probably a life that she's grown up around
Right. She's
Joseph.
seen for the last 12 years or so in her, yeah, in the community around her. Okay, got
I
it.
anticipate, yeah, but
I
she's
don't know how I
19
got off
and
the bus there, but yes, but 19 and has a good head on her shoulders.
but 19 and thinking, yeah, marriage sounds all right, but if it's all right with you, I'll take a single guy. Like, why not? There's probably plenty going and wild. So she goes home and tells her parents what had happened. And John Rigdon says, this is a quote from her brother, the story got out and it became the talk of the town that Joseph had made a proposition to Nancy Rigdon to become his wife and that she refused him. Close quote. Now, according to John C. Bennett, after Nancy refused him, Joseph, he said, look, I'm going to write you a letter to explain the doctrine. And the letter that survives is what we call the happiness letter. We'll talk about the so-called disputed authorship and provenance shortly, but you can find the full text in the Joseph Smith papers, and we'll link that in the show notes. So in the rule of completeness, we're going to share the full text of the happiness letter. And Jess, would you be willing to help me read it?
Sure.
Okay, so I sent you a document that I think you have access to.
Oh, that's exciting. Okay. Happiness is the object and design of our existence and will be the end thereof if we pursue the path that leads to it. And this path is virtue, uprightness, faithfulness, holiness, and keeping all the commandments of God.
But we cannot keep all the commandments without first knowing them, and we cannot expect to know all, or more than we know now, unless we comply with or keep those we have already received.
That which is wrong under one circumstance may be, and often is, right under another. God said, Thou shalt not kill. At another time, he said, Thou shalt utterly destroy. This is the principle on which the government of heaven is conducted, by revelation adapted to the circumstances in which the children of the kingdom are placed.
Whatever God requires is right, no matter what it is, although we may not see the reason thereof till long after the events transpire. If we seek first the kingdom of God, all good things will be added. So with Solomon, first he asked wisdom, and God gave it him, and with it every desire of his heart, even things which might be considered abominable to all who do not understand the order of heaven, only in part, but which in reality were right, because God gave and sanctioned by special revelation.
A parent may whip a child, and justly too, because he stole an apple. Whereas, if the child had asked for the apple and the parent had given it, the child would have eaten it with a better appetite. There would have been no stripes. All the pleasures of the apple would have been received, all the misery of stealing lost.
This principle will justly apply to all of God's dealings with his children. Everything that God gives us is lawful and right, and 'tis proper that we should enjoy his gifts and blessings whenever and wherever he is disposed to bestow. It makes me want to laugh.
The whole thing is horrifying.
Yes, yeah.
But
Laugh
it
in a
goes
terrified way.
I'm creeped out way. Yeah. So then it continues with, but if we should seize upon these same blessings and enjoyments without law, without revelation, without commandment, those blessings and enjoyments would prove cursings and vexations in the end. And we should have to lie down in sorrow and wailings of everlasting regret.
But in obedience, there is joy and peace unspotted, unalloyed, and as God has designed our happiness, the happiness of all his creatures, he never has, he never will, institute an ordinance or give a commandment to his people that is not calculated in its nature to promote that happiness which he has designed, and which will not end in the greatest amount of good and glory to those who become the recipients of his laws and ordinances.
Blessings offered but rejected are no longer blessings, but become like the talent hid in the earth by the wicked and slothful servant. The proffered good returns to the giver. The blessing is bestowed on those who will receive and occupy. For unto him that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundantly. But unto him that hath not, or will not receive, shall be taken away that which he hath, or might have had.
And then Joseph, it seems like, quotes lyrics of a song, which is nice to see that that is so perennial a thing to do, because it's in quotation marks. It says, "Be wise today, 'tis madness to defer. Next day the fatal precedent may plead. Thus on till wisdom is pushed out of time into eternity." So, a quote of some kind.
Then he continues, our Heavenly Father is more liberal in his views and boundless in his mercies and blessings than we are ready to believe or receive, and at the same time is more terrible to the workers of iniquity, more awful in the executions of his punishments, and more ready to detect every false way than we are apt to suppose him to be.
He will be inquired of by his children. He says, "Ask and ye shall receive, seek and ye shall find. But if ye will take that which is not your own, or which I have not given you, you shall be rewarded according to your deeds. But no good thing will I withhold from them who walk uprightly before me, and do my will in all things, who will listen to my voice and to the voice of my servant," that's me, Joseph, "whom I have sent. For I delight in those who seek diligently to know my precepts, and abide by the laws of my kingdom, for all things shall be made known unto them in mine own due time, and in the end they shall have joy." Peace out. That was the end of the letter. Any thoughts?
Wow. The coercion and manipulation in here, and the justification, like, hey, I asked, you need to give it, you're not going to have blessings. Like, this coming from the prophet of God in your community, how abhorrent. I knew it was bad, but I'd never read it before. I didn't understand it was this bad.
Yeah, when you see it laid out like that, him making the argument of this moral flexibility that, what's wrong in one circumstance is right in another. If it feels good, how
It's
can it be
just-
wrong? I mean, it's just so textbook. And you couldn't make that up, right? Like, unless you were a manipulative, coercive controller, it would be hard to fake a letter like that because you don't know how the mind works unless your mind works like that. So Nancy told her parents, Sidney and Phoebe Rigdon, what had happened. And Joseph came over to the Rigdon house a few days later to talk the matter over with the family.
Like, he didn't think he would get caught, like that she wouldn't say anything.
For sure. He thought if it was a case of her word against his, that his word trumped hers, as we will see.
Well, of course he did. Yeah, I'm not surprised.
John Rigdon said the family's feelings were, quote, anything but brotherly or sisterly, close quote, especially Nancy's, towards Joseph. So apparently Joseph came back a day or two later and matters were then, quote, satisfactorily adjusted, and there the matter ended, close quote. Now, a later Rigdon family version talks about the scene more directly and gives more details. In that version, Joseph Smith was at the Rigdon home denying that he had made a proposal to Nancy. Nancy came into the room and said, "Joseph Smith, you are telling that which is not true. You did make such a proposition to me, and you know it." Close quote.
Good for her.
I'm like,
right on.
Nancy Rigdon, you baddie.
Mm-hmm.
So a woman who was there, unnamed, maybe mum, maybe sister, maybe someone else, said, quote, "Are you not afraid to call the Lord's anointed a cursed liar?" Close quote. Nancy replied, "No, I am not, for he does lie and he knows it." Close quote. So this happened in the spring. At the end of June, Joseph Smith and George Miller met with the Rigdon family, and Joseph Smith's journal said that there was, quote, much unpleasant feeling, close quote, from the family, saying that they were, quote, confounded and put to silence by the truth, close quote. Then we know that Sidney Rigdon wrote to Joseph Smith a day or two later asking for a private meeting. He said, keep it confidential, don't tell another living soul. Oh, except Hiram, he can come. We don't know if that meeting ever took place. We only know that Sidney requested it. Now, Jess, what do powerful men do when they have behaved badly and they are scared their shitty behavior is going to get out?
They threaten, they manipulate, they hide things, they obscure the facts, all of the above.
Exactly. And they discredit the witness, right? So,
Oh,
yeah.
forgot that part. Yes.
Yes, it's so
common.
So
that
part,
it's,
yeah,
like,
exactly.
It doesn't just...
It's just part of the playbook. So Orson Hyde, husband of Miranda Hyde, later claimed that Nancy had invented the proposal after Joseph reproved her for her immoral conduct. So this is from Orson Hyde's speech that BYU calls, this is the pamphlet that they identify as Speech of Elder Orson Hyde, delivered before the High Priest's Quorum in Nauvoo, April 27th, 1845. It's printed by John Taylor, and BYU says, in the description, Joseph's attempt to reform Nancy was taken as an attempt to get her as a plural wife. So you see, it was all a big misunderstanding. But this is what Orson Hyde said. During my absence to Palestine, the conduct of his daughter Nancy became so notorious in the city, according to common rumor. She was generally regarded little, if any, better than a public prostitute. Joseph Smith, knowing the conduct she was guilty of, felt anxious to reprove and reclaim her if possible. He, accordingly, requested my wife to invite her down to her house. He probably had multiple wives, so she had her own house. He wished to speak with her and show her the impropriety of being gallanted about by so many different men, many of whom were comparative strangers to her. Her own parents could look upon it and think that it was all right, being blind to the faults of their daughter. There being so many of this kind of men visiting Mr. Rigdon's house at the steamboat landing, for he kept some sort of tavern or boarding house, that Mr. Smith did not care to go there to see her. Miss Nancy, I presume, considered her dignity highly insulted at the plain and sharp reproofs she received from the servant of God. She ran home and told her father that Mr. Smith wanted her for a spiritual wife, and that he employed my wife to assist him in obtaining her. This was a very good time for Miss Nancy and John C. Bennett to wreak vengeance on the victim of their hatred for his severe admonitions. Mr. Bennett, I think, was a boarder at Mr. Rigdon's at the time, and I am told was all honey with the whole family. No one liked Dr. John C. Bennett. Close quote. And then the speech continues. Can Mr. Rigdon believe that Joseph Smith ever tried to seduce his daughter? Can he believe that he ever tried to get her for a spiritual wife? If he really believes this of Mr. Smith, how could he propose to build up the kingdom to him unless he fellowshipped such abominable works? But if Mr. Smith had tried to get Miss Nancy for a carnal wife, he might probably have been successful. I do not, however, think Mr. Rigdon believes any such thing of Joseph Smith.
We've heard that recently in public discourse. If I wanted it, I could have it, but I didn't want it. Not my type.
Exactly. Why would I have to
God.
take something forcefully that I could just, it's like because you delight in exerting control.
And can we just clarify, wait, like, isn't his wife also Joseph's wife?
Mm.
So he's talking about, so like the little bit of irony there about women being visited by multiple men, which I don't believe Nancy was. He's sharing out his wife.
Yeah, because then he gets the benefit of, having multiple others. So the original letter doesn't survive in Joseph Smith's handwriting. There's a whole thing about the church trying to have this plausible deniability that maybe Joseph wasn't actually the author. But I will tell you something. The happiness letter has been quoted so extensively in church settings as Joseph Smith's words. There is an awesome video on YouTube. I will link to it in the show notes. It's by Thinker of Thoughts. And just have a watch and see just how often Joseph Smith said, happiness is the purpose of our existence. Just see how often the church has touted that as Joseph Smith's own words. Okay, I will take them at their word. General conference speakers quoting the opening section about happiness and ignoring everything else, and now it's just people are going, well, let's look at this in context. And then the church goes, you know what? It might not have been his after all. He might not have actually
No,
written
yeah,
that.
no, we don't want the whole context. Thank you very
No,
much.
yeah,
We're
we've
happy
been
with just
saying
our selected versions. Yeah.
been
Wow.
saying the prophet said this for a long time. So if you wonder where their handbook starts, it began in the very, very beginning. Joseph Smith was the master manipulator, and
Yes, he was. Wow.
he just gathered like-minded people to him. Anyway, sorry that's so depressing, but we'll be back next week with another What Do You Know Wednesday. And until then, I just want to say I'm sorry for what I said when I was Mormon.
Man, I'm so sorry for what I said when I was Mormon too.
Well, you didn't say any of that.
No, never will.